So, wow. Here's this one stronghold that pulls in all sorts of, and I call these some of the big boys. Judgment, bitterness, hate, envy, injustice, distrust, unbelief, unrest, discontent, hypocrisy. All go against the definition, the very definition of love. Everyone assigned to make you not truly be able to love. And then we talk about all these other spirits that could potentially come in. Woundedness, depression, delirium, rebellion, fear, idolatry, haughtiness, which brings stubbornness, revenge, wickedness, escape, sorcery. All these things just coming through this one fort, this one place that Satan has in you, where he can bring all these devils in. So, if you do nothing else, you have to, for yourself, make sure you're clear of all this stuff. And then, certainly, as you can, specifically, those members of your family that are Christian at least have this conversation. If they're not, you can have the same conversation, you just don't talk about spirits. I just did this the other day with the family member. Kind of had the same conversation, just talk about spirits. Just kind of talked about, judgment and bitterness and stuff like that. and the beauty of it, they actually received it. Like the whole concept was, hey, listen, we have to understand you are a victim. That's right. See, they agree with that. I said, well, the person that did this to you, they probably were a victim too. Well, that's tough for them to receive sometimes. I said, well, what kind of parents did they have? Well, so what you're telling me is what they did to you is what they were trained to do. Well, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so they're a victim. Oh, so you got to work through it, but ultimately we understand, Ephesians 6 says, we battle not against flesh and blood. So when someone's victimized, that's what the rejected person thinks, I'm a victim. Then you got to get them to see, wait a minute, the person that victimized you is not to blame. Right? In the natural, right? More than likely, they're doing what they were trained to do. Right? If it's your parents who are the culprits, well, then where did your parents learn parenting from? I mean, think about it. Literally, one of the most important functions in the world is parenting. You got to go to school and get a license to drive. You got to all this other stuff has nothing to do with parenting. Yet anyone can be a parent. No, often if you can get the person to recognize, especially when they're adult and they've gone through this stuff and they've failed, they've made decisions and gone against their own decision and all this kind of stuff, you can say, it's not like you make great decisions. If you can get them to talk the truth, come on, it's not like you make great decisions. It's not like you haven't done things you specifically said you weren't going to do. If you know the person, you can go through the history with them and say, okay, if you as an adult can make a decision to not do something, yet do it, maybe that's what happened to your parents or whoever the person that hurt. So at some point, if you work with them and have patience, you can get them to finally say, okay, that person probably was a victim too. Woo! The reason that's huge, they can now actually forgive them. If they can't get to that, they cannot forgive them. Okay? So the whole thing is forgiveness. And the forgiveness cannot happen if there's judgment. People say, oh, I forgive them. They say it, but the judgment is still there. If the judgment is still there, there is no forgiveness going forward. Okay? Like I said, the key thing is to recognize I have been a victim. Satan has used me in some stupid things. I've made decisions to not do something, yet I still did. Or vice versa. So if you can get that person to recognize for yourself or for the person that you have been used. There have been times that you got gaps. I didn't mean to do that. Why did I do that? Okay. Something's going on. That's enough to then make the leap and say, well, maybe this culprit, this person that did this stuff to you, was also a victim. And if you really know the person close, you can just go back through the generations and you'll see it's the same pattern. Same pattern. So as you minister on rejection, the key thing is getting the person to recognize that they've been a victim, and like I said, they'll agree to that, but also recognize that their culprit, whoever victimized them, was probably also, not probably, was a victim as well. Because none of this has to do with humankind. All right? We bow. It's Satan against God. End the story. Satan against God, and he uses people. All right. Now I'll give you one. I'll end on this, because in talking to my mother about this, she identified that one of my ancestors actually was a witch, which I didn't know. It's like, oh, so that person willingly sided with Satan. Guess what? Still a victim. Right? Because humans are stupid. We don't really understand what we're doing. So even though that person willingly used black magic, technically they're still a victim. They're still a victim. So the key thing is getting the person to understand this whole victim thing. And if you can get that, usually you can get them to reverse the judgment about the person that victimized. That's really the crux to getting this broken in other people.
So when having a conversation about the stronghold of rejection with an individual and all the things that can result, why is it that you don't mention spirits?
Well, because
with an unsaved person.
Well, because unsaved people don't believe in God. So most of them don't believe in the devil either. Now, sometimes they give you an open, like one conversation I had the other day. The person said, "That devil." I said, "Oh." So because they brought it up, I brought up the devil. But often, I can listen. They're Christians. I can't talk about spirits about, because in their church, that's just not taught. They don't talk about spirits. They don't talk about sin. So talk about spirits, they look at you like you're crazy. So a lot of times when I recognize that, I don't use the word spirit. The names are sufficient. Judgment, bitterness, hate. The names are sufficient. All right. Based on where the person is, I can then move into spirits. But so often the case, because that's just not taught in so many churches. It's a rare thing. If any of you grew up in Baptist, you didn't talk about spirits in Baptist church. What spirit? Because Baptists generally don't even recognize the power of God. So that was back then. Well, the power was back then too. All the other stuff was back then. So I'm just saying, in average, most Christians, this is not something they understand.
I was just sitting here trying to remember when I began to believe in spirits. And I guess you're right. It was not until I got saved.
Yeah. I mean, we all talk about the devil. The devil made me do it, right? Heathens do it, right? But they're joking.
Yeah.
They don't really believe.
Yeah.
Right? There's we'll close on this. There's a quote from me decades ago, and it says this.
C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis.
The craziness? No, not that one.
Okay,
this doctor said, talking to God is prayer. God talking to you is schizophrenia.
Okay. Who said that?
Some psychologists, but that statement is throughout the world.
That's true.
I just saw, not that TV, sometimes TV is a good indicator of what the world is thinking. A woman went and killed a man. But before she even killed him, she went to an attorney and said, "I'm going to kill him, but I want to plead insanity." He's like, "No, that's not, you're already telling me now," which means it's not correct. He said, "Hey, that's a plea. God told me to do it." And she went and shot him and said, "God told me to do it." So, insanity.
Wow.
And she got off on insanity. So notice, God talking means you're crazy. Because that psychologist, I think it was 1963, made that statement, and it's in the world.
Yeah, very much so.
It's in the world. God talked to you, you crazy. Wow. Here's a problem. Many Christians believe that. Even though the Bible says and proves God speaks to people, that many Christians don't believe. Don't believe that. So, understand rejection for yourself, and then please, those who God brings to you, minister about rejection. But the key thing is the victim part. If they don't get that, then the judgment can't leave. They have to see the person differently. If you can't get them to see the culprit, whoever the culprit is, as the victim themselves, then this is not going to go anywhere. Any other questions? All right. Take a little break, and then Marcus will kick off the second lesson. The red button, red button, red button.